All right. The next thing I've got for you, getting back to David Lee Summers, the writer. Um, what spurs your creativity when you're crafting and writing a story? What really gets your creative juices going?
So for me, pretty much just for me, it's kind of life in general. I take my cues from watching everything kind of around me. I work at an observatory. Actually working with people who are studying exoplanets, studying stars. We were talking before the interview about swapping ghost stories and things like that. You work late at night in an observatory where there's maybe 2 or 3 of you, and you hear spooky sounds. It's hard not to kind of share spooky stories in that situation. So
Right.
all of these kinds of things just serve as my inspiration. I live in southern New Mexico. I am it's just such a historic kind of area. I like to say, Pat Garrett, the guy who shot Billy the Kid, is buried a 1/4 of a mile behind my backyard. And when I do my walks through the neighborhood, I walk right by Pat Garrett's burial site. And how do you not be influenced when you're seeing Albert J. Fountain, who was in the midst of the whole Lincoln County War, right? His memorial is there. And you see these famous people from history. And it's like when I drive back, when I drive between my home and the observatory, I drive through Geronimo's stronghold. All of these things just influence and all become part of the stew that kind of becomes inspirations for stories. And my dad used to take, we used to do family trips where we would drive around, different places. And I kind of, one of the times that really stands out to me is we're driving through northern New Mexico, where one of the few really big battles in the western United States in the Civil War happened at a place called Glorieta Pass, just north of Santa Fe. And he played the what if game with me. What if the Confederacy had won that engagement instead of the Union, which is what happened. And he started throwing out these scenarios about the Confederacy going up to Denver and capturing the Mint and all of that. And that's like perfect training for a science fiction writer, because you start asking, what if something happened different than the way you thought it might happen? So
That's incredible. And when you actually, you have the idea in your head for a story, the natural progression to that is when you sit down. I mean, I stole the term from my son. Are you the architect, where you construct the outline and the A, B, C, D, E? Are you the gardener? You just sit down and it has to come out, and whatever grows, grows.
Well, I'm definitely I'm definitely an outliner, an architect. I sit there and plan out my stories these days. But while I'm planning and while I'm doing that kind of architect phase, I feel very much like a gardener. And it's I feel like I kind of go where the story takes me. It's my outlines aren't a real strict here's Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, A, B, C. It's more like here's plot point A, here's plot point B, here's plot point C. And sometimes it's like an ideal will grab me enough that I'll actually write a partial scene right there as I'm doing the outline. And that becomes kind of my process for doing the beginning of the book. And sometimes even as I'm writing one of these scenes, it was in one of my steampunk books. I like to tell the story that I was writing the story of a face-off between a samurai warrior and Wyatt Earp. Okay, and in the middle of it, it's like there's an explosion. That wasn't in my outline. I was like, what? Okay, let's run with it and see where this goes. Who's blasting into the compound in the middle of this thing. And that ended up going off on its own whole different direction. And I had to rewrite that whole I loved where I went with it, and I said, okay, I just need to rewrite that part of the outline to get back to where we get back into the main part of the story.